Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Amanda. I am the owner and fiber artist for Hookemcreations, and I'm excited that you're all here today because today's going to be a little different than what I normally do. I normally do tutorials and share my experiences of what projects I'm working on, etc. But today is going to be a little more of story day. So as many of you have, if you've been following me for years on social media platforms, or you've seen my shop, you can see right off the bat that my husband and I are both 4-H alumni. A lot of our experience and skills come from 4-H, and of course, I have to share my stories from 4-H and my experience, as well as some takeaway points if you are competing in either like a county fair open class setting, or you're in 4-H yourself, or you know somebody whose kids are in 4-H and are like, hey, this person has some pointers that you might want to take a look at because they have experience. So sit tight, get yourself a cup of coffee or some tea, whatever your choice of beverage is, get a project to work on, and come hang out. And let me give you some pointers about 4-H, as well as maybe that can transition into those open classes, but also just hear some funny stories of my bad choices that I made while in 4-H. So let's get started. So, to get started, I have 5 points that I want to share with you guys, and we're going to work from the bottom all the way to the top. So we're going to start at number 5 and then work our way to number 1. But I want to share first of all that 4-H has changed their guidelines and rules for knitting and crocheting, as well as a bunch of other projects, where now it's no longer saying you have to use these specific needles or hooks and you have to do these difficult stitches. Or I remember I did knitting 1 year, and I remember it specifically said you had to use circular knitting needles and it had to be a Fair Isle design. And that's where my love of color work came from, and my expertise of color work came from, because I have that experience. But my experience in more difficulty stitches isn't there. So I'm trying to relearn how to do some difficult stitches, and as I'm relearning them, I'm sharing them with you guys on this channel, little at a time, video by video. So that's why I'm doing all those tutorial videos, because not only am I teaching myself to relearn how to do those stitches, but I'm sharing it with you guys as well. And I have multiple books. I'm also learning from other people because I didn't have that experience. When I was growing up, listen to me, I'm not even 30. Actually, I'm almost 30 years old. But we're not getting to that point. I'm almost 30 years old, and I'm still in that generation where we still went to the library to get books to learn from. YouTube didn't have the education that it does now on how to knit and how to crochet. When I was in 4-H, a lot of my stuff was either handed to me in like pamphlets, or I had to go to the library to find the information that I needed, because Google was kind of on information. It wasn't always trustworthy. It still isn't trustworthy, but it's not the greatest resource of information. You got to be picky on your information that you get from Google. So growing up, I actually had to go to the library in order to get knitting and crocheting books, or we had to go to the craft store to get the knitting and crocheting books that we needed to do X, Y, and Z, even with patterns. Ravelry wasn't really a big thing then, or if it was just getting started. It wasn't really widely known to a lot of us. And so I remember going to the library to pick out books to learn how to do the Fair Isle knitting. I remember going to the craft store to pick out books so we can do certain projects. My sister was also a crocheter in 4-H. She and I did a lot of crocheting together in 4-H, and I can't tell you how many times we'd sit there and be like, all right, we're going to start a movie, and that's how we timed ourselves and how long we made a certain project. We would time ourselves based on what movie or TV show we were watching, and we had a notebook keeping track of how much time we spent on our projects. Oh yes, those were the good old days. No, we didn't have Crochetland apps, no row counter apps, none of that. We didn't have any of that back then. Back then, we still had flip phones or the sliding keyboard. If you were fancy enough to get those kind of phones, and then your iPad, and then your iPod, not your iPhone, not your iPad, your iPod was separate from your phone, or you had or if you're like me, whose family was very much on a budget, you had an MP3 player. That's what you had. That was your version of a Walkman. A digital version of a Walkman. That's what we had back then. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked from my 4-H stories. So I recently looked at the rules for 4-H for knitting and crocheting or any needlework type stuff. And they have changed the rules quite a bit. Like I said earlier, they were very specific back when I was growing up on what you had to do and what needles you needed and colors and things like that for each level. Now they have the rules set up in a way that it's based off of how many years of experience you have in knitting and crocheting. So if you are a senior and this is your first year knitting, they expect you to show what a first year knitter would do. And I wish they did that when I was in 4-H, because I think that's actually fair, because it's not really fair for anybody who's just learning how to knit and expect them to know how to use circular knitting needles right out the door. And I'm really glad that 4-H has seen that and saw that their numbers were low in those projects and that they changed the rules for those projects. I'm really glad that they did that, and you shouldn't feel discouraged at all going into those projects in any way, shape, or form. No matter how old you are, you should always be encouraged to knit or crochet and do it at your skill level. So let me just say applause to 4-H for changing the rules and realizing that that was a situation, and that they fixed it. I'm really glad that they did that. So now on to my points. If you are competing in 4-H and you need some pointers on what to do and what not to do, I got some stories and I got some pointers for you. Starting at number 5. Number 5, enjoy the process. It should be enjoyable. You should pick a project that is enjoyable for you to do and that you can use afterwards, because you're going to get it back. Unless you're going to state, then it goes to state and then you get it back. I promise you get it back. So enjoy the process. Enjoy the process of picking the pattern, or if you are going to create something out of your little head, just create something and pick out some colors that scream you. And that brings me to my next point. Be original. What year was it? I forget what year it was. It was the year I did knitting. And I kind of felt discouraged with the knitting project at that time because there were only 2 of us in the entire project. And I felt like I got a grand champion because I was a higher level and I did more advanced work. But, which, I mean, okay, sure, I came in first place in the project, that's great. But I know I didn't do the greatest, and if I had other people in the project at my level, I probably would have gotten away with like a reserve champion or just a simple A honor if I had real people to compete against. And but the thing that really got me to the thing in that project was I didn't find another pattern to knit up. Instead, I knitted my own pattern. I created my own pattern and was able to knit it up for that year. And I got a lot of higher points. I got higher points on that project because it was original. It wasn't something I picked out of a book. It wasn't something that I got from Ravelry.com or X, Y, and Z or this big creator over here or a magazine. I actually sat down and created a design to use in my Fair Isle knitting. And I got higher scores in that project because it was original. So that's where my next point is: be original in your work. If you can and you're at the place where you can create your own patterns, then do it. Experiment. This is the time to experiment on it and see if it works. And judges actually really do like seeing originality. They like, because you can only make so many blankets. You can only make so many blankets. You can only make so many amigurumis. Be original, be you, make whatever is in your comfort zone, for one, but still push yourself. Be in your comfort zone, but push yourself. And stay true to yourself. And that's why I put number 4 and 5 as number 4 as be original, be you, create something that is you, but also to enjoy the process while you're doing all that. But then the next thing, number 3, is very, very important. And here's why. Number 3 is pick a yarn that will showcase your work. Let me repeat that one more time. Pick a yarn that will showcase your work. Why do I say that? So, here's a story for you. Again, I'm going to show my age once more in this video after I take a drink of coffee. When I was in crochet, my very first year in crochet, I was probably about 12 years old, 12. Yeah, I think I was about 12 or 13 at the time. I think I was about 12 because I didn't start crocheting until I was about 11 or 12. And that year I decided, you know what, I just started crocheting. Let's do a project. Let's see how it goes. And I remember going to the craft store. I think we went to either Michael's or I think we even went to like Walmart, the yarn section in Walmart. And I remember we were just sitting there. I think it was Michael's. We did go to Michael's because we also needed to just look at patterns. And I remember we got this pattern book for blankets. My sister loves making blankets. That's who she is. Like, that's her thing. Like, to this day, she still makes blankets. I think I have like 5 of her blankets in my house because that's what she makes. I like making, I didn't find out till much later in life that I like making amigurumis. But my sister, blankets. Blankets till the day is gone. That's her thing. That's her comfort and relaxation, is just make blankets. And that's how she gets into her Zen mode, is just make blankets. And for me at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to make. And all I knew was like, you could make blankets. And I really didn't want to make a blanket. I still don't like making blankets, and yet I make them. So my sister got a book to make all these different types of blankets, and I think she used that all through the rest of her 4-H years, if I remember correctly. And my and my mom and we were just looking at different yarn and different projects. And I remember, if you ever go through a yarn section of a craft store, sometimes you'll find these free patterns that you can just rip off in the middle of the aisleway, and it's their advertisement to try and get you to buy yarn because you're like, oh, I can make this here. Yeah, it was one of those patterns. And there was this pattern for a purse with this new yarn that I believe it was Lion Brand that came out with it. I believe it was Lion Brand. It could be Red Heart. I don't remember. It was so long ago. And as soon as I say the name of the yarn, you all are going to cringe because that shows how old I am. This yarn was called the eyelash yarn. So it was a yarn that had like these little hairs, fringy hairs all the way across. I have it somewhere in my house. It's still in my stash. And every time I see it, I cringe because I can't believe I did it. So I made this purse out of this eyelash yarn with no other yarn, just that yarn. So at the end of the project, it quite literally looked like a Muppet purse. And this was the early 2000s. I kid you not. So I even put a liner in it, and I had handles and everything, and it was a cute little purse. And I turned it in, and I think I got like a B or an A with that project. And why did I get a B or an A in that project with that project? Because my yarn choice. They couldn't see the stitches because of all the fringy, hairy texture of the yarn. They couldn't see it. So now from that experience, I now tell other people who are doing 4-H or open class type competitions for county fairs or whatever they're putting their work into, don't use yarn that the judge won't be able to see the work. You want to showcase your stitch work. I understand that blanket yarn is the big hullabaloo right now, as well as like the chunky, parfait chunky and sweet snuggles from Loops and Threads at Michael's and such. And as fun as that yarn is, I've worked with that yarn before too. I advise to stay away from it when you're doing competitions because they really want to showcase. You really want to showcase your work and show your skills and your stitch work. I know it's a lot of fun to make amigurumis with that type of yarn and stuff like that, but if you can really stick with more of the acrylic or even like a cotton, something that they can see the stitches with, because they're also judging you based on your tension and color changes and various other things. So please choose your yarn wisely. And next point brings up the reason why I wish I learned from other people and not just from just winging it like the way that I did. The second point is to block your work. Don't procrastinate. That is probably one of the hardest things as a 4-H'er because we are very busy in 4-H and other areas. We get through the school year and then summer is here and we're like, yes, it's summer. And then we have camp or we have another sport or we have X, Y, and Z. I was a dancer. I had dance classes all through summer as well. And I also as I got older, I was teaching classes as well throughout the summer to kind of get ready for the next year because I enjoyed teaching classes. I wanted the experience. And I would procrastinate on my projects like every other kid in America that's ever been in 4-H or is in 4-H. You should not procrastinate on your projects. I kid you not, towards the end of my 4-H time career, I think by my junior or senior year, I started working on 4-H. As soon as school was done, I was working on 4-H to get everything done so I didn't have to procrastinate. And guess who still procrastinated even on her senior year? Hi. So block your work. I remember I'm part of a Facebook group for the Pacific Northwest, knitters and crocheters of the Pacific Northwest here in Washington State. And somebody that was a part of that group hopped on and said, hey, I just recently judged at this county fair open and 4-H classes for knitting and crocheting. And I just want to say, if you are going to compete in knitting and crocheting, you must block your work. There were so many beautiful pieces, and they would have won if they had blocked their work. So try your best, if you're knitting and crocheting, to try and get it done at least a couple weeks before project check-in. Block it, and then have it take some nice pictures, so that way if it's folded up, you can actually have some nice pictures to put next to the project so people can see, like it's wrapped around a mannequin nicely or something like that, so people can see what it actually is. And have those pictures ready for project check-in as well. Because not all the time when you are competing will they have mannequins. For us in our county, for knitting and crocheting, they didn't always have mannequins ready for the knitting and crocheting projects. They had mannequins for the sewing projects, for sure. I believe that was the superintendents that had the mannequins, and they used that for their displays. I'm not sure if that was a county thing or if that was a superintendent thing. But for knitting and crocheting, they didn't have any dress mannequins for us to use, and I made this beautiful poncho for knitting one year, and I wish they had a mannequin for it so it could showcase the work that I did. Instead, they folded it up and put it into a display case. So if your county does do a display case, take some pictures of your work so they can actually showcase it next to your project so people can know what it is. That is if your county does do showcases. I know some counties just, you bring in the projects, they do the judging right there, and then you take it home. I've heard one county actually does that. So yes, block your work. Don't procrastinate. You can procrastinate on everything else. Just don't procrastinate on knitting and crocheting. Lies. Don't procrastinate on everything else. Just don't procrastinate. Plan everything out. Time it out so you can get it done and get some sleep. Especially if you're showing animals, get some sleep. And then the last point, which is number 1 and is a big, big deal for me, is don't take for granted the record sheets. What do I mean by that? So obviously I did not plan on having a knitting and crocheting business. My dreams were actually to be a dancer and a dance teacher, and clearly that is not what I am doing now. I am a knitter and crocheter, and I've done custom orders and X, Y, and Z, and now I'm doing tutorials. I've done a few classes. I've tried helping people and tutoring people on how to knit and crochet. a couple times. And so things definitely have things don't always go the way you think and don't go the way you plan originally, but that's okay. Go with the flow. That's how I am. So why do I say don't take the record sheets for granted? Since starting my own business, I realized that a lot of the stuff that I had to do on those record sheets are the same things I have to do every single day for this business. What do I have to do? I have to calculate the price of the cost of materials and equipment, and I also have to know how much time goes into these projects. I also am a mom of 2 boys, and they're both very young. They're both under the age of 5, and they are constantly needing mommy 24/7. When it was just my oldest and I, when my husband is underway or deployed, it was very easy. I could just put him down for a nap and I was able to crochet for like 2 or 3 hours and get a lot of work done during that time that he was napping, or I was able to block him off into one room and clean or something like that. But now I can't do that anymore. Managing your time, calculate how much time goes into a project. Nowadays they have things like Crochetland and Row Counter to kind of help you calculate how much time is going into a project. I've recently discovered that Crochetland is no longer compatible on the iPhone, or at least on my iPhone. I don't know about anything else, but it still works on my iPad. And so I use it on my iPad still to this day. And the nice thing about the Crochetland app is that it also tells you how much they think you deserve to get paid if you put all the costs of material in as well, and they also calculate how much you get paid per hour. And you can either do hourly wage based off of your state's hourly wage, or if you're like me, I was a waitress for many years, so sometimes I just put in a waitress wage. Just do the $2.13, or I round it up to $2.50 just for the heck of it. And then whatever, and if I feel like, no, it needs to be more, then I add a little bit more to it. But those record sheets are what I use. The things I put on those record sheets back then are the things I use to this day. And there's research that goes into like the patterns, searching for yarn, and your time for the project, and the costs of material. All of that information that you put on those record sheets are vital if you're going to continue on and possibly start a business of your own, or even possibly doing it as a side hustle while you're working a full-time job. So please don't take these record sheets for granted, because they actually are used as a learning tool for you so you can know how to do it someday. And honestly, I knew that was the point of the record sheets when I was doing them in 4-H, and at the time I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. But now I see it because I do it every single day. So please take it as a learning opportunity and don't brush it off. Also, with those record sheets, don't make stuff up. I can't even tell you how many times I cannot tell you how many times people were turning in projects, literally writing on the record sheets as they're coming in, making stuff up just to put on the record sheets. And to be fair, that's not the way it should be. That's not a learning experience. That's actually just getting something done just to say that it's done. And that's not a way to learn. So please don't take it for granted. Actually use it as a learning tool. If you enjoy these stories, and if you want to hear some more of my 4-H experience, or even just other experiences, let me know in the comments below, or if you are a 4-H'er, what experiences did you have, and what points would you like to make for our future 4-H'ers or current 4-H'ers, or anyone who wants to compete in an open class at a county fair or some other competitions out there? What points or advice would you give to a fellow crocheter or knitter? Drop them in the comments below. And until next time, happy crafting, and I will see you in the next video. See you later.